Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Keeping Passion Alive, Proven Ways to Reignite Your Sex Life, episode 155. Here's the truth. Passion doesn't have to fade just because you're raising a family. Don't ignore your sex life. It's too easy for sex to slide to the bottom of the priority list. Relationship health improves when there is an active sex life. Whether you're struggling to get back in sync with your partner or simply curious about how to keep the spark alive after kids, this conversation will give you practical tips and hopeful reminders that love and desire can thrive in every season of your life. There are so many reasons to let our sex life slip through our fingers. The bedroom is too close to the kids. We are too exhausted to find the energy for sex. Or medication may have an impact. Even just scrolling on your phone at night to zone out instead of making conversation with your partner can create distance that does not lead to sexual intimacy. Couples often experience sexual dissatisfaction once children come. The best thing you can do to prevent this is not let silent resentments pile up, which only adds to the distance. Instead, stay honest with each other so that emotional intimacy is still there while the two of you try to solve this as a team. Keep communicating about what's hard for each of you. Sex doesn't have to be special and exciting every time. Don't wait for desire to kick in at the end of a long work day after having finally put the kids to bed, or you'll be waiting for nothing. It's a very real possibility that even if you aren't completely up for it when you start, you have fun and be glad that you bothered by the end of it. Understanding gender differences can improve your sex life. Sex educator Emily Nagoski, in previous episodes number 50 and 131, states in her book, Come As You Are, women tend to be more responsive in their desire, whereas men experience more spontaneous desire. Responsive desire requires something to kickstart it, a sensual touch, for example. But it doesn't mean the person has less of a sex drive than someone whose desire operates more spontaneously. It's just different. Sex is one of the ways couples can remember you both are still important as just the two of you. The same night that I wrote the script, the Wall Street Journal reported Americans are having a record low amount of sex, even less than during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to this new study, led by researchers at the Institute for Family Studies. This continues the downward shift in sexual activity. The report is called the sexual recession. They analyzed the data on sex and intimacy in the latest general social survey produced by NORC at the University of Chicago, which was collected in 2024 and released in May. Just 37% of people age 18 to 64 reported having sex at least once a week, down from 55% in 1990. The decline is even greater in young adults. Almost a quarter of the people age 18 said they had not had sex in the past year. This is twice as many as in 2010. Clearly, this is a topic worth exploring, and we have a great person to help us out with that. Today's guest to help us explore this important topic is Dr. Rebecca Howard-Udy, certified sex therapist, licensed mental health counselor, and certified EFT couples therapist. And you know, my audience knows how much I appreciate EFT. She specializes in helping couples navigate desire differences, emotional disconnection, and the complex realities of intimacy during the parenting years. With over a decade of clinical experience, Rebecca combines research-backed approaches with practical tools. She is the co-host of the podcast The Love Lab, Uncensored, and the founder of Parents in Love Coaching. Her first book, Parents in Love, A Guide to Great Sex After Kids, was published October 21st, 2025. So glad you joined me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Let's begin with what are some of the myths and misconceptions about sex and parenthood that you'd like to dispel?
Okay, this is such a great question to start with. I think that number one is that the most common thing that brings couples into sex therapy is a difference in desire. And this is so painful. It's so painful. And also, it's totally normal. It's more normal to have a difference in desire than to not. These couples who are struggling with this are more the rule. The ones that don't, well, first of all, I don't see them. But they're the exception here. So that is like really a huge myth that I want to dispel. Like if you are struggling with this, it's normal.
That's true.
Yeah. And another myth that comes up so often, and I think that some people in the field have done a really good job of talking about this, but this myth of spontaneous desire.
Encouraged by television.
Absolutely. Encouraged by television. And so we think that spontaneous desire is the right way to experience desire. And it's really just a myth. And I think, arguably, that even when we look back, and often it's looking back to the beginning of the relationship, back when we had all this spontaneous desire where we were just, ripping our clothes off and having sex on the kitchen counter or something, it probably wasn't even all that spontaneous then, because there's a natural build. You anticipate the date, you plan what you're going to wear, you make a reservation at a restaurant, if you're a woman, you shave your legs and you blow dry your hair. That's not spontaneous. That's planned.
That's right.
And all of that anticipation builds desire. And then I think the third really myth that I see so often along with the spontaneous desire is that if you don't have that spontaneous desire, then you don't have any desire. And so the counterpoint to spontaneous is responsive desire. And especially for women, because they have less testosterone, they're much more likely to have responsive desire. And what that looks like, sort of from a boots on the ground perspective, so to speak, is that in order to feel desire and arousal, you actually have to put yourself in a situation where that's possible. So that might mean touching or kissing, being in a sexual situation. And so what that means is that desire for a lot of people starts with willingness. Willingness to see where it goes, willingness to be in that situation. And so, misunderstanding that really holds a lot of people back, I think.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I like what you're saying about responsive. I know there was a sex book I would tell clients about maybe 30 years ago that basically said it's good to start 24 hours ahead of time. And there's some truth to that, still, that there's something about that feeling connected to each other and not just leaping into it, which I actually think testosterone helps the leap. And the responsiveness, I think, is more about women and less testosterone. And it's just different, and understanding that is so important.
Yes, absolutely. And as I think this is the feminist coming out in me, but I think as in so many things with women, devalued, discounted.
Yes.
And so responsive desire is a beautiful
I think
thing.
it is. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. But it is so often thought of as less than, not wanting. And, we all want to be desired. We all want to feel like that feeling from your partner. I can't wait to have you. I must have you right now. It's understandable. But to say that someone doesn't have any desire, and this is often an individual, the person who's struggling with low desire will say, I don't have any desire. I just don't ever want to have sex ever. And what that tells me is that maybe the conditions aren't right. There's a lot of different reasons why that could happen, but what are the conditions that you can create so that that responsive desire can emerge, where we can start with willingness and not have that be a bad thing, not have that be something wrong with you, that you are starting from a place of willingness.
Yes. In your introduction to your book, I loved your term vibrant connection, which and this is quote, refers to a close bond that achieves a couple's ideal balance between security and flexibility. Could you explain what this means and describe the 3 simple but powerful steps to help achieve vibrant connection? I did. I thought that was a great way to put it.
Oh, thanks. That's, I think, what it feels like. It is, it's all about balance. And, balance is not something that you get and have. If you think about riding a bike or anything that requires physical balance, we may not have to think about it a lot, but our bodies are constantly rebalancing, when you're riding a bike. And so this is the same for this vibrant connection. It requires intentionality and the willingness to rebalance. And what that means is that we have, and each couple's going to be different, what works for them, and because each person is different. So getting this balance between space and closeness, between sort of that erotic charge. Esther Perel talks about this a lot, and I think the way that she talks about it is so brilliant. But that's what makes the vibrancy. It's not, the enmeshment, the really closeness, or the disconnection and the distance. It's really having both, having a relationship where you both are, close and intimate, but also encouraging each other to go and do separate ventures and, spend time with other people, other friends. And so that's, those are just a couple of examples of what that balance could look like. And this requires couples to have the ability to do perspective taking and to be differentiated humans, which is really hard. It's like, this is really hard. I think probably you and I work on this a lot with clients, because what that requires you to do is to recognize that this wonderful person who you love and are sharing your life with is a separate human than you. And
instead of we all should be married to clones, that everybody, I'm always rattling on about the respect for differences, because I think that's really the heart of a successful relationship and between partners. And that respect for differences gets so hard for people to find again sometimes. And in the beginning, that's what we're all in love with. Oh, this person is so cool because they are blank, fill in the blank, different than me. And then we get tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also the flip side to whatever it was that we loved so much. If you are a person who's like really, highly planned and controlled, you might choose a partner who is spontaneous, and they give you access to this part of yourself that you don't have without them. And then you live with them day in and day out, and they drive you crazy,
Relationships, I forgot who said they weren't work, somebody recently, and I'm like, I'm sorry, that's just not true. And it is that commitment to wanting to keep the sexual flame alive, because it is a lovely connection. And I am surprised at how many people, there's all kinds of statistics about people not being sexual. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that the tension really comes when there's a difference in how sexual, or the way that partners want to be sexual with each other. And so if you have a partnership, which I have worked with many people who are both very sexual and they're really well aligned there. Also, I've worked with people who neither one of them, they don't have a lot of sex, maybe a couple times a year, or maybe they have an agreement that that's just not part of their partnership.
And the agreement is totally
That's
fine.
Right.
And my issue is when people don't talk about what's going on.
That's right.
That's the
That's right. And
problem.
I think that this is touching on, well, so many things, but that is the problem, is when there's assumptions about how it's going to be. So it's not an issue. The level of sexual encounters, the frequency, none of that really matters. What really matters is how it feels inside the relationship. And, I agree with you. I think that the sexual spark, the connection, is something that's really wonderful. And it really is something, if you have a monogamous agreement, as many couples in committed relationships, many married couples do, that you're only sharing that with your partner. And that puts a lot of pressure on that, but it also makes that relationship really special. And so I do think it's important, but the thing that's the most important about it is, like you're saying, that communication. How do you, and some of it's a negotiation.
Yes. And that being able, and it's like sex, money, those are two things that are just really hard for couples to talk about. But being able to practice that talking is crucial, I think, to being able to have a better relationship.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sex and money are things that are really important. They're both, hold a lot of zing, a lot of charge. They're both really sexy. And also one of the reasons why is because both of them are topics that are they're often taboo. When we're growing up, we get a lot of messages about, we don't talk about money, we don't talk about sex, those are private. And so then we don't have the tools often to talk about them actually. And so it makes sense that a lot of couples really run into trouble here.
Yes. So there is a cycle of disconnection. And in your book, you describe it as a repeating pattern of reactive behaviors, misunderstandings, and emotional distance. And I liked how you captured all three of those things. So I'm going to say it again. A pattern of reactive behaviors, misunderstandings, and emotional distance. Would you share more about this and what we can do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so as fellow emotionally focused therapy lovers, in EFT, which is primarily what I use with couples, we call this the cycle. Terry Real, in his couples therapy method, calls it the more, the more. I kind of like that phrasing of it because it's really dynamic, so it's all about the dance. So the more I get silent, the more you talk. The more you chatter on, the more I get silent. And what does it feel like to be silent? What does it feel like to be the only one talking? Neither one of those feels good. Both of those are disconnection.
Absolutely.
And when we feel disconnected, our nervous systems send us signals of danger. We are attached, connected beings. It's a survival strategy that we have. It's deep in our DNA. We're connected humans, right? And so when we feel disconnected, we get those signals, danger, danger, danger. That's deep, that's visceral. Those are really deep vulnerabilities. But over time, we learn that those are not okay to show to other people. It's not safe to walk around with our hearts on our sleeves. And so over time, we develop these protective behaviors that layer on top of those deep fears and longings. And so when we worry that we're in disconnection, and especially with our beloved, like these people who are so important to us, when we feel like we're getting into disconnection with them, our deep underneath vulnerabilities start to sound the alarm, and immediately we layer on the protections. So what that can look like is withdrawal. It can look like getting quiet. It can look like blame or criticism. It can look like a lot of different things. But in the cycle, what it's really important to recognize is that when you, as a human, feel this vulnerability and then you layer on your protection on top, it happens so quick, you might not even be aware that it's happening. It happens so quick. You feel something bad, you get protective. And your protection is like you've taken your fist and punched your partner in their tenders, right? Like, so my protection pushes my partner in their vulnerable place. And then they get protective. And then that does the same thing for me. And so we go back and forth, and the more protective we get, the more disconnected we are. And that's the cycle.
And I think understanding that cycle is really helpful. And then being able to say, whoa, wait a second. We're repeating a pattern here that doesn't work. I'm not sure what's going on, but let's just take a break and come back to this conversation. And it's the coming back to the conversation. One of the things I recommend is that people begin by saying what was important to them about the conversation, and then what was important they think was important to the other person. And that helps you with the thinking, which reduces the emotions, which might help the conversation get greased to continue. So I think that interrupting that pattern is important to understand how the pattern happens. We're doing it again. That's great. What are the 5 ways couples can reignite the passion in their relationship?
Oh, this is a really good question. And also there's...
Maybe 4 of the 5. People can buy the book for the 5th.
Yeah, right, okay. Okay, so the first thing that has to happen is you have to take the pressure off. This is the first thing that you take off. It just is essential. Nothing else can happen if there's pressure.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, if there's pressure to perform, if there's pressure to show up, if there's pressure to have sex, if there's pressure to initiate in the perfect way so that your partner says yes, all of these just put it's putting the lid on desire. It really works against any of the goals that couples have when they come in and they want to get closer and have less of a difference in their desire. So that is really like the biggest thing that people can do to reignite this passion, is to figure out the ways to take off the pressure. And taking off the pressure doesn't look like high desire partner saying, well, I'm not going to initiate, but I'm keeping track on my clipboard and how many days and hours and minutes has it been since we talked about sex. That is not less pressure. Your partner feels that. And so you may need, as a higher desire partner who's been waiting and waiting and waiting, has probably tried everything and is frustrated and lonely and all of these things, you may really need to get some support for yourself in order to help to take that pressure off.
You know, it's really interesting. That's the first thing. I think that's incredibly important. I have had a woman who talked a lot about, but she was my client, not the couple, about how her husband wanted sex like 5 times a week, and it was just too much. And I sent them to couples, to a sex therapist, but they really never addressed pressure as far as I know, because I think that's exactly what she was reacting to, is feeling the pressure of it, and him not understanding that was just hard for her to feel responsive 5 times a week or whatever. And so that's really interesting. And I know it was a certified sex therapist, so thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really essential. I think it's the first place that you have to start. But I think there's a lot that goes into that, right? Like, just taking off the pressure. I'm like, yeah, just take it off. No big deal. Like, it's not that easy. Like, it requires a lot of buy-in and a lot of, it's something that we work on hard. And so the other part here about reigniting the passion is taking responsibility for your own desire. So whether high desire partner or lower desire partner, I don't even like the term low desire partner because we're measuring the partners against each other. So higher and lower, we don't, part of taking off the pressure is dispelling this myth that there's anything wrong, anything abnormal, because a low desire partner is only low compared to somebody else. In a different relationship, they might be the high desire partner. That aside, taking responsibility for your own desire. So whether that's the high desire partner or the low desire partner, your pleasure and desire is nobody's responsibility except for your own. And so also recognizing this and taking responsibility. Some people, this looks like, for a lower desire partner, this might look like, reading like a lot of smutty books. Like really,
I
truly.
used to have Nancy Friday's Garden of Secrets. I think I can't remember, on my bookshelf to hand out and lend to people. Yes, because it was about women's sexual fantasies.
Yeah.
And then I would recommend, and I can't remember the magazine, that's so long. Oh, letters, Penthouse Letters, because letters are different than pictures, and letters can get things going. That's so neat that you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, men tend to be a little bit more visual. Women tend to relate more to like eroticism. And so reading and the is how like women's fantasy tends to be a little bit more activated. So that's why I often like recommend these smutty books. But I loved your example as well as this idea that you start 24 hours ahead of time.
Yes.
Right? And so these are just examples of how you might take responsibility for your own desire. I know these are not like, this might not be really what you're looking for. Like you might have been looking for like the Cosmo, like 5 things you can do. And I have those too, but I think the thing is that the same thing doesn't work for everybody.
That's right. No, I think things are very complicated. I think there's too much simplicity in the world that's gotten us into trouble culturally. And my fight in this podcast is to try to help people have more complicated understanding. And you don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar, but a willingness to listen to the complicatedness. And I'm always rattling on about the 4, 5, 6, and 7 between the 1 and 10, or the gray in between the black and white. And I really believe that the complicatedness is what we need to address to help people really understand themselves.
Yeah, and I think a beautiful way to address that is that if you're not quite sure how to do that, is really to follow your own curiosity.
Yes, I love curiosity.
Right? So if you can get out of your own perspective and be really curious about your partners. And so that's another one that really helps to reignite passion, is getting really curious about pleasure. Oftentimes, long-term couples, there's nothing wrong with the, weeknight sex, the routine, we do this and then we do this and then we do this. There's nothing wrong with that. That's bread and butter. But getting curiosity, like making space to be curious about pleasure, really does help to reignite desire. Because if it's not pleasurable, then why would we want it?
Yes. Yes. I agree. I do. I think what I liked about the Netflix special, The Principles of Pleasure, is that it just actually got me talking to more and more people about pleasure in general, not just sexual pleasure, because it's almost as if, particularly in the grind of being a parent, you lose track of your own pleasure because your focus is so outside of yourself. And thinking about having pleasure, you shouldn't have to wait till retirement to have pleasure.
It's so true. And, going back to sort of this idea that sex and finances are these taboo subjects that we also often don't really know how to talk about. Somebody who isn't experiencing a lot of desire may not really know what they want. They may really struggle to actually put words to it, even if they have an incredibly supportive partner who's so curious. So if they can't do that outside the bedroom, which is so common, and I think especially for moms who are constantly taking care of everybody else all the time and thinking about other people, to actually think, what do I desire? What do I want? Maybe that's a nap. Maybe that's a little space. Maybe that's a bath. Maybe what they're really fantasizing about is a weekend by themselves in a hotel room.
Yes.
Come on, let's be real, especially when you're really in the trenches. And so I will often help people if they're really having trouble accessing this in the bedroom. Some people are like, oh yeah, I would love it if we did more of this together in the bedroom. This is really what I desire. This is like what would bring me a lot of pleasure. That's great. If you have access to that, amazing. But if you don't, that's fine. Then what that tells us is that we're going to start outside the bedroom. Because if you can't think about what you really want and advocate for that outside the bedroom and believe that you really deserve it outside the bedroom, then you're not going to be able to find those words and figure it out in the, loaded conversational zone of sex.
I just finished today, actually, watching Asura, which is a Japanese series on Netflix it's 7 episodes. But when I think about it listening to you, what I'm thinking about is all the silence about sexuality, and the four daughters find out their father is having an affair and had a child with another woman, but it's so much silence, and it takes place in the 70s when definitely I think there was more. And one of the things that happens is they find in their mother's bedroom when she dies, they find these, the Japanese used to have those drawings of sexuality because they didn't want to talk about it, but they would give them to their daughters. And so it's just silence, so much silence surrounds this topic with ourselves, which is what you were talking about, and then with others. I hadn't thought about that part of the show until this moment, but it was a really great show. So this is a question you offered up to talk about today, and I thought it was really great. What are the top 3 excuses you hear from couples in therapy for why they can't make time for each other? And part 2, what are your suggestions for some easy ways to make time for intimacy when you're a full-time parent? I think everybody feels that frantic crunch of lives and meeting needs and soccer games and driving and who's doing this. So I thought this was a great question from you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so relatable. Like, what?
Yes.
Why do you think I asked that question? You know what I mean? Like, I feel this question in my own life. I think every parent does, Yeah. So the top excuses that I feel in my own life and I hear from clients and friends and all the parents in my life is, number 1, the kids need me. The kids need, just maybe we can even take out me. The kids need, right? Like they are bottomless pits of need. They need your attention in the moment that you're trying to have a conversation with your partner. They need to be driven back and forth to sports. They need to do sports. If they don't do sports when they're young, then they're not going to be able to do sports in high school, and then they won't get a scholarship and they won't be able to go to college. There's a lot of pressure here, right? And we buy into it. We buy into this high intensity parenting. The kids need. There's this really interesting study that came out recently about that, and the sort of my takeaway from this study is that stay-at-home moms in the 70s spent less time with their kids than full-time working moms do now.
I bet that's true. That's so interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
It really is. Yes.
The expectation of time and investment in our children. We want them to have these good lives. We want to do right by them. And they need a lot. And they take everything that we can give, and then they still need more. And so that is a huge excuse that parents make. And it's not untrue, but that's a big one.
I balance that with people by saying, and your kids also need to see a back and forth in your own relationship and taking care of yourself. I know it's juggling a lot, but it's good for them to witness that.
Bingo. Absolutely. And I would even add on to that it's good to teach our kids that they're not the center of the world. Because while they might be the center of our worlds and like the holder of our hearts, that is not the case when they go out into the bigger world. And so when we teach them that, I love you, you're important, and so am I. So is your sibling. So is the dog. You're not the center of the world. that sets them up for success. Yeah.
Yes, reality. Reality. That's a great reality check.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. The other excuse that I hear, and again, legitimate, I feel it, I'm too tired, I'm touched out.
Yes, tired. Yep.
Tired, touched out. This has to do a lot of times with the time that we're trying to have sex. At the end of the day, this is not an optimal, the nighttime is not really the right time for parents. This is not optimal. But at the end of the day, you're exhausted. Your nervous system is shut down. You want to doom scroll and go to bed. You don't want to be touched by anybody or touch them or give or receive, So, but it's an excuse, I'm too tired, I'm too touched out. And then just too busy. This sort of goes with the kids need a lot, but the lives, jobs, hobbies, there's a lot of competing priorities. And we fill up our time with a lot of things. I mean, I feel myself doing this where I'm inviting friends over and committing to this and volunteering for, things that I feel like are important at the kids' school and taking on more clients and just packing it all in. And so that busyness, that just perpetual busyness that we all have is another excuse, I think.
Absolutely. No question about it. What are some easy ways to make time for intimacy? The second part of the question.
Well, first of all, recognizing, which I just touched on, but that the nighttime is not necessarily the best time. Now, hey, listen, if this is working for you, if it works for you and your partner, awesome. I am not here to tell anybody that they're doing it wrong, right? Great. If it's working, stick with it. But for a lot of people, something I hear all the time is that people will say, well, in my mind, I really want to have sex. I'm going through my day and I'm like, oh, that'd be great. In theory, it sounds amazing to be connected in that way. But when you actually get into the situation in this window of time where you're okay, it's 9 o'clock, 9:30, the kids are finally in bed. I want to be asleep by 10 because I got to get up early. We have half an hour. Let's cram this in. This is not optimal conditions to have this connected, pleasurable experience. So the solution, getting creative about that. Many people have some flexibility in their job, so they're working from home. What about meeting in the middle of the day? What about thinking about, well, would it be okay to let the kids do some screen time in the morning so that you can, be connected then? So getting creative and thinking outside the box on when those windows are that you might be more open to being sexual. And then going along with this is that if you're going to have a lunchtime meeting with your beloved, you're going to have to schedule that. So actually putting it on the calendar, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I do not put it on the calendar, I am overbooking myself. I am dropping the ball all over the place. If it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. So this doesn't feel super sexy to a lot of people. It goes back to this idea of the spontaneous desire that we're really invested in. It's if it's not spontaneous, it's not any good. But, I think we just have to get over that. So scheduling it, literally putting it on the calendar.
I agree. I think scheduling, and as you age, there's taking a pill that may affect sexuality and desire, so you want to be able to skip it that day. I mean, there's lots of good reasons for scheduling, and I just think it's a totally normal thing to do, and I keep trying to normalize that for people so they don't feel it's weird, because it isn't. So one of the negative cycles that you describe as a pattern a majority of couples get trapped in is pursue and withdraw. Would you explain why this happens and what this is about?
Yeah, so the pursue withdraw is an interesting cycle. And, to be honest, most couples that I have worked with fall into this. All of us have pursue and withdraw tendencies, fight and flight, but we have often well-worn patterns. We have a preference. And so it may be different in different relationships. So in one relationship, you're the withdrawer, and in another relationship, you're the pursuer, or over the course of a relationship, that may switch. So these aren't hard and set patterns, but we have tendencies. And the reason why this happens is that when connection feels threatened, these tendencies kick in because they protect us. And so some people protect themselves by blaming, by criticizing, and other people sort of protect themselves by this withdrawing, getting more quiet. And when you have two people who are sort of playing these roles, they tend to push each other further and further from the center.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm thinking of a couple. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so the goal actually of the therapy and working with somebody who has this cycle, which, by the way, is every couple. Like, I don't know anybody, myself, my friends, everybody has this. The goal is to move both people closer to the middle. So the withdrawer, who's not going to bring anything up, who just wants peace and quiet, their nervous system is soothed by maybe if their partner smiles at them and acts happy, it's like that's all they want. Whereas the pursuer, they really want to, they want to talk about their feelings. They want to feel validated. That's how they feel connected. But both are important. Our nervous systems need both this active connection and the more passive connection. And so ideally, instead of pushing each other further and further apart by doing these protective moves and getting stuck in this cycle, you want people to kind of come towards the middle. So that means that the person who's more in the pursuing role is able to tolerate their own discomfort and wait and sit in silence and hold. And the withdrawer, the person who's more comfortable not saying anything, that it feels like too much of a risk to bring something up, that they might avoid as their strategy, helping them to come forward a little bit and sharing more of their perspective. And that's where that true connection comes in.
I love that. The positive cycle to strive for, you label rupture and repair. Tell us about how that works.
Yeah. So rupture is inevitable and mostly unintentional.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right? I mean, we don't really want to hurt other people mostly. Right?
That's
Sometimes
right. Yeah.
we may lash out when we feel like we've been hurt ourselves, but for the most part, I think it's inevitable because we're two humans and we have different perspectives, and we don't mean to hurt each other. And so that's just a given. Like, you are in a relationship, you're going to have rupture, whether it's a parent-child relationship, a friendship, or a romantic relationship. What is not inevitable and unintentional is repair. Repair has to be intentional, and it requires perspective taking. You may never really agree with or really even relate to your partner's perspective or why they acted the way they did or why they, their perspective. But if you can step out, it's almost like if you imagine yourself with these like boots that are stuck in the mud. I'm in Massachusetts, and sometimes we go to Cape Cod, and there's this like big salt marshes where there's mud, and you have to you get your boots stuck in the mud. You got to grab the top of the boot and unstick it. It's like you really got to put some effort into it. So when you're taking perspective in order to repair, you got to unstick yourself from the mud, from your own perspective, and suspend disbelief. I know that my partner must have a perspective here that makes sense. Even if I don't like how they acted, even if it doesn't make sense to me, how can I just go into it thinking, I know that it makes sense? And once you understand where they're coming from, then the repair comes more naturally. And so, but it does require a lot of intentionality, and sometimes it really feels like hard work.
Gottman says that the more you turn towards each other, the more successful the relationship will be. And so that idea of repair is something I spend a lot of time talking about. My daughter, I said, I'm the only person in the family that apologizes. And she, in adolescence, said, Yeah, because you have the most to apologize for. But I do take it very seriously. So I really liked how you balanced the disconnection triggers of fear and stress with glimmers. And I thought it was delightful. Could you explain this to my audience?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to give credit where credit's due. This is not my idea. This is the brilliant and amazing Deb Dana, who is a social worker, and she's a polyvagal, theorist. She's done a lot of work applying this nervous system theory, which is really quite complex, to the work of therapy and social work. And she just is really beautiful. And this is an amazing example of how she's used this. So triggers, we're all familiar with. This is something that we hear all the time. Trigger warning, trigger. Yeah. So a trigger is something that puts your nervous system into fight or flight. It's a danger signal. And when we get triggered, we feel unsafe. Our nervous system feels unsafe. A glimmer is the opposite. It's the opposite of a trigger. It's a moment where we have a sense of connection, of safety, of well-being. So for me, I feel glimmers the most, usually when I'm in nature. I really feel glimmers when I'm at the ocean. I also really feel it when I'm petting my dog. It's a feeling of well-being, of love, of being connected to something bigger. It almost feels like a swell of happiness. And we often let these pass by. They go by us really quickly, and we don't pay as much attention to them. But I would love for us to all have glimmer warnings. Can we just do that? Oh, glimmer alert, glimmer warning. Because this is actually where we heal our nervous system, is by paying attention to and cultivating glimmers, not by avoiding triggers. We're always going to have triggers. That, we can't really get rid of those. And if we spend our lives trying to avoid triggers, then we are in anxiety and we're in avoidance, and our worlds get smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's not about avoiding or seeking out triggers, but more about appreciating and highlighting those glimmers when they come to us, because that is the regulated nervous system. Our nervous system is supposed to be able to go into fight or flight. That's protective. We want to be able to go there, but then we also want to be able to come back down. We want to be able to re-regulate. So a regulated nervous system is not a nervous system that stays out of fight or flight all the time. And the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight system. A regulated nervous system is a nervous system that's flexible, that can go in and out, up and down. And so that's what glimmers help us do, is recognize, oh, I'm in regulation right now. This is my home. This feels good.
I think one of the reasons it touched me so deeply is that I'm always very much a duality Gestalt person. And I think how much energy goes into triggers and hypervigilance in our culture right now. And so the balancing with glimmers, I think, is just such an important balancing act for that word. So I appreciate it. Tell us about hot versus warm sex and why to value both.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think hot sex is self-explanatory. Yeah. This is what we see in the movies. Yeah, this is what, the eroticism is. It's in porn. It's in books. We don't need the hot sex is what we think we should be having all the time, But warm sex is sex that's more connected. It might be more routine. It can oftentimes be deeply pleasurable. A lot of time, long-term couples, they sort of boil it down to the greatest hits. They know how to give each other pleasure, and they do those things. And so the warm sex is kind of what keeps the lights on. It's it keeps the train moving. And it's the routine, it's the contentment. We have these feelings of, if I'm going to take this out of the bedroom and into other feelings, we have these feelings of these peak experiences, this intense joy. And then we have contentment. And contentment is something that we just live with. We live with day in and day out. We're content. It's good. But it's not real flashy. And so that's sort of the difference between hot and warm sex. Hot sex is like, oh, wow, that was amazing. And I'm going to be honest, mostly that happens when you're away from home. A lot of times, especially couples with
Novelty
kids,
too.
they're like,
yes.
the novelty, yes. Some things happen. Maybe it's like after a big fight, or you're on vacation, your kids are not right next door, or you've just had this like amazing couples massage, and then you go back to your hotel room and it's like phenomenal or something. It's a little different. There's a little novelty. And that hot sex is, it's okay to have that be a sprinkle in, it keeps you going. But the warm sex, it's okay if that's sort of the bread and butter. That's how it usually is for most couples. It would be hard to sustain the intensity of hot sex all the time. To be honest, it almost sounds a little exhausting. Who has time for that all the time?
So before you tell my audience, I'll remind them of the name of your book and your website. Is there anything we haven't covered you'd like to toss out there?
Yeah, okay, so we could do a whole podcast on this, but we haven't talked about penetrative sex. And I think it's really important to bring this up. So, for most heterosexual couples, penetrative sex is a big part. When we say sex, people think I'm talking about penetrative sex, intercourse. And I think that one of the real keys to a successful long-term relationship, especially with aging bodies and changing desires, is to broaden our definition of what sex is. I often talk with couples about even talking about sex is sex. It's not just about the penetrative sex. And for women in particular, now again, I'm not trying to get down on anything that anybody likes and that's working for them. However, the statistics show us that 95% of women need clitoral stimulation to orgasm. This can happen with or without penetrative sex, but it's not all about the penetration for women. So I think we need to be talking about this more and really dispelling the myth of, I can't tell you how many people come in and for whatever reason, we can't have sex. It's like, what does that mean? Can we break that down? What is sex? Can we expand that definition?
Yes, I agree. And the name of your book and website.
Yes. Okay. So the name of the book is Parents in Love: A Guide to Great Sex After Kids. It is written for parents, but it also is about any couple who's in a long-term relationship who's struggling with a difference in desire. So even if you're not a parent, I think you can find something in this book. And then my website is my name, Rebecca Udy, which is spelled like Rudy, but with an E. Yeah.
All right. So go ahead, reclaim your bedroom, your partnership, and your playfulness. After all, raising kids is serious business, but your love life doesn't have to be. Your sex life deserves more than nap time leftovers. You can buy my children's book on Amazon, Dancing with Your Lizard Brain, and find me on all social media at Rhoda on Couples. Are you on social media, Rebecca?
I am. Also my name, Rebecca Howard Udy, on Instagram.
Okay. Thanks again. It was a great conversation.
Oh, I so enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.